Who could have imagined it? Qin, once the kingdom no one believed in, the laughingstock of its rivals. It rose to become the kingdom before which every rival trembled. The land of Qin. Before it got big, it was a mess. Dirt poor, totally isolated. Just a remote, rugged corner that the rest of the world couldn't care less about. For centuries, the Qin people were basically trapped. They're not the bullies, they're the targets. Constantly fighting just so they wouldn't get wiped out. Nomadic tribes raiding from the west, and the so-called civilized state out east looking down on them like uncultured barbarians who had never amounted to anything. Then comes the 350s BC, everything changes. This complete nobody walks into this struggling state, basically telling the king, I can fix this. His name is Shang Yang. And what he did next, it didn't just change Qin, it completely shattered the old world order. He ripped up the old rules and pushed through this brutal, hyper-efficient reforms. Step by step, he turned a weak, broken country into a terrifying, highly organized war machine. To the point where they started steamrolling every single rival kingdom around them. Literally, nobody thought this coming. It's wide, right? Like, how does one outsider just walk in and fundamentally rewrite the rules of an entire era? So, that's what we're breaking down today. I'm Su, and this is part 1 of the Qin Wars of Unification, the rise of Qin. This is where it all began. To understand why Qin became what it became, we have to rewind hundreds of years to the final days of the Zhou dynasty. For centuries, the Zhou kings ruled through a pretty old-fashioned system, feudalism. Here's the thing about feudal system. The moment the central king loses his edge, the whole thing falls apart. And that's exactly what happened in 771 BC. Nomadic invaders sack the Zhou capital. The king is killed. The survivors pack up, flee east to a new capital, Luoyang. But damage is done. The Zhou king still get called the son of heaven, but real power is gone. The local lords have already built their own armies, their own tax system, their own government. So they no longer need permission from anyone. It begins the spring and autumn period in Chinese history. It's a polite name for 300 years of chaos. At first, over 100 small states are all tearing chunks out of each other. Over time, the strong swallowed the weak. By the early 4th century BC, only 7 major players are left at the table. Let's look at the map. In the east, along the coast, you got Qi, rich from trade, sophisticated, cultured. Down south, the vast jungles and rivers of Zhou cover nearly half of known China, with armies in the hundreds of thousands. Up north, Zhou and Yan are constantly fighting with nomads, which make them tough, battle-hardened warriors. In the central plains, Wei and Han sit on the ancient heartland, the birthplace of Chinese civilization. All cities, all wealths. And then in the far west, cut off by mountains and passes, there's a Qin. The other states look at Qin and see them as backward farmers in villages, and as a buffer zone against the barbarians, a military outpost on the edge of nowhere. For generations, Qin was the punching bag of warring states. They lost the battles, they lost their territories. They watched their more sophisticated neighbors develop iron weapons and complex bureaucracies, where they struggled just to survive. By the time Duke Shao took power in 361 BC, Qin was on life support, humiliated in war, land shrinking, nobles stabbing each other in the back. Desperate times, desperate measures, and the Duke Shao was desperate. In 361 BC, Duke Shan issued a proclamation that shook the warring states. He would accept any man who could make Qin strong. Land, gold, titles, whatever you want, just make Qin strong. And that's when a brilliant but completely broke young man from the state of Wei walked through his gates. His name was Shang Yang, but history remembers him as Shang Yang. Shang Yang wasn't an aristocrat. He wasn't a general. He was a philosopher, a follower of a harsh anthropometrical school of thought called legalism. Legalists believed people were lazy by nature, that they only respond to two things: heavy rewards and brutal punishment. And I believe that nothing, not family, not traditions, not noble blood, should get in the way of what the state needed. Shang Yang pitched Duke Shao a radical idea: tear down the old system, burn it to the ground, and rebuild Qing from scratch as a machine with one purpose: total war. The Duke bought it. Starting in 356 BC, Shang Yang launched the most sweeping reforms in Chinese history. First, he attacked the nobility. In the old system, aristocrats held power simply because of who their fathers were. Shang Yang said, no more. Under the new system, titles could not be inherited. You want rank? Earn it on the battlefield. Kill one enemy soldier, you get one rank. Q2, 2 ranks. A person could outrank a noble if he took enough heads. Revolutionary, for the first time, a common man could rise to the top, but only through violence. Second, he dismantled the land system. He abolished the old communal fields and introduced private ownership. But only for farmers who produced enough grain. Work hard, keep your land. Slack off and it's confiscated, and you're enslaved. He also banned all other jobs. No merchants, no craftsmen, no wandering scholars. Everyone farms or everyone fights. No third option. Third, he destroyed old clan system. Extended families used to live together. Grandfathers, uncles, cousins, all under one roof. Shang Yang forced families to split into small units the moment sons came of age. Why? Because family loyalty competes with loyalty to the state. He wanted no bond stronger than the bond between soldiers and Qin. Fourth, he built a terrifying mutual surveillance system called Baojia. Families were grouped into units of 5 or 10. They had to report each other's crimes. If one member broke the law and the others didn't report it, they got the same punishment, often execution. If you did report, you got the same reward as capturing an enemy in battle. The state's eyes were everywhere, and the punishment severe. Shang Yang famously said, quote, "The people feel punishment, and that is good. If they stopped fearing, the state would collapse." Here is scenario that tells you everything. That in 1 year alone, his new laws executed over 10,000 people. But here is the thing about Shang Yang. He applied the same ruthless logic to himself. No exceptions for family, no favors for friends. Once, when the crown prince broke the law, Shang Yang couldn't punish the prince directly, so he punished the crown prince teachers publicly, brutally. And it worked. Within a decade, Qin was unrecognizable. Grain production exploded, the treasury overflowed, and the army transformed into something the other state had never seen. Not a bunch of aristocratic warriors, but a disciplined, relentless force of peasants who knew exactly what victory meant. Land, wealth, and social status their fathers could never have dreamed of. Let me pause for a question. If you were born a peasant in Qin, would you have supported his reform? Are there any other ways to make China strong? Think about it. Because if the answer is no, then Shang Yang was the only option. The Qing army under Shang Yang's reforms was absolutely terrifying. Every man between 15 and 60 had to serve, no exceptions. Soldiers were organized into squads of 5, and here is the brutal rule. If one man fled, all 5 were executed. Think about that. If you run, you kill your 4 comrades. So you don't run, you charge, or your own squad mates will cut you down themselves. Officers had it even worse. If a company of 100 failed its objective, the commanding officers was executed. If a regiment of 1,000 failed, the colonel was executed, and his second-in-command got promoted to replace him. This created an army that literally could not retreat. The Qing infantry advanced in massive formations of tens of thousands. The crossbows, the most advanced in China at the time, unleashed waves of bots before closing in for the kill. Qing swords were longer, sharper, and more uniform than anyone else. Standardized production meant every soldier got the same high-quality weapons. But what made them truly unstoppable was this. Qin fought a lion late, not just to defeat. In the old days, battles were almost ritualistic. 2 armies met, fought until one side admitted defeat, and everyone went home. Captured nobles were ransomed, cities surrendered and paid tribute. But Qin didn't play that game. Qin didn't take prisoners. Qin didn't accept surrender. They buried entire enemy armies alive. And the army was matched by a state bureaucracy of efficiency. Shang Yang set up a system of counties, districts governed directly by officials appointed by the central court, not hereditary lords. He standardized weights, measures, and laws across Qin territory. He created a population registry tracking every household, every family, every man who could be drafted. By the time Shang Yang was done, Qin wasn't feudal kingdom anymore. It was a modern state, and it was hungry. But Shang Yang's brilliance came with a terrible price, and it finally caught up with him. In 338 BC, Duke Shao died. The new ruler, the same crown prince whose teacher Shang Yang had humiliated, came to power with a thirst for revenge. Within months, Shang Yang was accused of treason. He tried to flee Qin, but the very laws he had written made escape impossible. Every innkeeper turned him away. His own surveillance system required them to check his papers, and he had none. The hunter was caught in his own trap. They caught him, and the punishment? Shang Yang was tied between chariots driven in opposite directions, torn apart in front of the court he had built. His entire family was executed along with him. But here is the brutal irony. The new duke hated Shang Yang's guts, but he kept his reforms, every single one, because they worked. Qin was already too powerful to go backward. The machine was already in motion. Over the next 130 years, the Qin war machine ground steadily eastward. 6 Qin rulers, from Duke Xiang to King Zhuangxiang, had crippled the other states. In 316 BC, under King Huiwen, Qin swallowed the rich Sichuan basin to the south, turning the grain supply from adequate to overflowing. Under King Zhao Xiang, General Bai Qi, one of the most brutal commanders in history, systematically shattered the states that could challenge Qin. In 293 BC, at the Battle of Yiju, he allied 240,000 allied Han and Wei troops. In 278 BC, he invaded Tu, took its capital, and burned its ancestral tombs. Then came the Battle of Changping. In 260 BC, Bai Qi surrounded Tao army and annihilated 400,000 soldiers. The 6 kingdoms were, for all practical purpose, already broken. By the time the young prince Yingxing, the future emperor, inherited the throne, the writing was on the wall. Qin controlled half of China's farmland, most of its iron production, and the most disciplined army the world had ever seen. The remaining 6 kingdoms were terrified. They knew what was coming. But the young king had his own problems. He was only 13 years old. Powerful regents controlled the court. Conspirators plotted behind his back. And for the first few years of his reign, the unstoppable Qin war machine went strangely quiet. Why did they stop? What was really happening inside the Qin court? And how would a teenage king whose father died, his mother's lover plotting against him, seize control and launch the most devastating military campaign in Chinese history? Those questions take us straight into the Unification Wars themselves, the conquest of 6 kingdoms that would forge China for the very first time. But before a king can conquer his enemies, he has to conquer his own court. And Yingten had a very long list of enemies at home. Next time on Qin's Unification Wars, the King's Revenge. A teenage ruler plays a deadly game of cat and mouse, eliminates the conspirator who thought he could control him, and begins planning the destruction of every other kingdoms on the map. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this, hit subscribe so you don't miss part 2. I am Su, and this is The Rise of Qin.